Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are across this crazy wide world of ours. I've been trying to work really hard to get this message out about the BIA, which is the Bureau of Indian Affairs. My throat's a little bit dry, so I've been trying to keep it nice and lubricated with liquid stuff. Because it's just sinus this time of year, sinus, and you can pretty well tell some of my cheeks are a little bit fluffy or whatever. So the point that I want to say about this is when I want to discuss the defunding the BIA, and from this point out, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, I'm going to call it the BIA. It comes down to the three, what I call the three R's, is reform, renew, and reestablish. And reform, and what I mean by reform is that we mean to reform the BIA. Now, whether we keep it the existing BIA or create another name, which I'm pro creating a new name for it, not keeping it the BIA because of the historical drama. This was created in the 1820s by John C. Calhoun and Andrew Jackson. And remember, during this period of the 1820s, 1830s, we had Trails of Tears, Indian removal. We had settlements move of Native Americans across the West into present-day Oklahoma and other areas of maybe present-day Missouri, but namely present-day Oklahoma, and forced reservations. We forced people off their native lands and moved to another land where we're more desolated and where they had to rely on the government for substance, which really, in essence, is an issue in itself. And though it's not as much as an issue concerning slavery, but when we talk about slavery, just Indian removal as much as slavery is just as traumatic and is just as wrong. And like I said, when we put this in context, we're talking about the 18th, 19th century, and we're talking about white Europeans who established this type of policy. And it was later on in the 20th century, later on in the 20th century, that we started realizing that our transitions from the past, but we can't go back to the past. We can only look at present and try to reflect on things that we can do better in the future, and not necessarily have the transgression of what our past ancestors were done. And technically, some of my ancestors were not necessarily all white Europeans, so technically I can't always say that it's them that, in the sense that my ancestors were that issue. But needless to say, the issue becomes reforming the BIA. What I mean by reforming is getting rid of all the 12, get rid of all the division offices, creating 4 divisional offices, moving the headquarters, demolishing or debunking the headquarters in Washington, D.C., moving the centralized location somewhere and I've talked about this previously, somewhere in Texas, Oklahoma, Nebraska, somewhere in that region, because the majority of the tribes now that exist are west of the Mississippi. Predominantly, a lot of them are even west of the 100th meridian point. So, in essence, what we're talking about establishing a headquarters, which is more friendlier to the native tribes. And the issue becomes not necessarily giving the regional offices the power, but take that empowerment and turning it over to the tribes, because really the tribal leaders knows what's good for their tribes and not necessarily the federal government. And like I said, there's always this distrust in the federal government. So the issue becomes moving this off the issue and moving it into an issue where it's more reform and renewal. The second one is renew. The renew issue is we renew, we repledge, and create a new agency where we create this renewal or this reestablishment where Native American people, indigenous people, will have a better understanding of now this is not necessarily the government, but a new type of government that's not necessarily focused on the federal government themselves, but focused on the individual tribes themselves. And like I've said this in a few sentences before, or in a few minutes ago, really the empowerment or the agency should be turned over to the individual tribes and not necessarily to a regional office because that's more bureaucracy. And the big issue with me creating more bureaucracy is not the solution to solving the Native American distribution of high unemployment, high drug use, high issues on spousal abuse, low education, low job opportunities. It's actually moving these situations into more of a positive situation. And the issue becomes when we look at this, we're creating an issue of positivity and not negativity. And for the last 200 years, the issue has become negativity and not necessarily the issue of positivity. And granted, the Biden-Harris administration appointed a person of the Navajo Nation as a member of the BIA, but this situation has been going on for almost 4 years, and really hasn't been any more enlightenment and any more autonomy given to the tribes. And like I said, this is the Navajo. And though I'm not knocking the Navajo, they seem to be a little bit more established than some of the tribes. And remember, there's like 500 something tribes. And though the Navajo can be a nation inside themselves, because really they're located on the four corners regions of the United States, which is Colorado, Arizona, New Mexico, Utah. So the issue becomes creating more of autonomy for all tribes and not necessarily for one or two tribes. Co-place with the renewal of the issue of casinos. And my contention, my argument is once a lot of the boomers die out, the issue, now with the rise in online gambling, the casinos on these tribes are not necessarily always going to be busy, and we need to create these casinos in more of a equal infrastructure, more into housing, and to get the water rights to these people. The contention is to say if a casino closes, is convert that into some low housing, since it's already got the infrastructure, water, most of it because they've got toilets and everything else on the casinos, and establish a usage for the tribes there themselves. And finally, it's reestablish. And reestablish here, folks, is reestablishing the new Bureau in a way that's positive, that's more empowering to the indigenous people, and more energizing them locally instead of the federal government. The federal government is an issue, and it creates a dependency on the federal government, and it's not the government's responsibility to create a dependence on them, but the people should be dependent upon themselves, or the tribes should be dependent upon their reservation or their tribal leaders, and not necessarily the federal government. And I think this is a big issue and a big cusp of the issue concerning the issue of reestablishment and recreating a new bureau that is more indigenous friendly, creates more of a tribal involvement amongst the tribes and not necessarily the government. So in summary, my belief in defunding the BIA centers on reform, renew, and reestablishment of the Bureau in a way that helps the Native Americans. Please like and subscribe below. And if you have any questions, concerns, feel free to reach out to me at bthomasmillerpsych. That's bthomasmillerpsych@gmail.com. Also, folks, if you know people within either the Harris administration or the Trump administration, please forward this video off to them, because I really think this is a critical issue that needs to be addressed. And it keeps the old cliche, kicking the can down the road, is not the issue right now. And the issue has become, let's create a more empowerment on reservations and not rely on the federal government. Anyway, folks, hope to talk to you real soon. Have a great day and take on the week.